Bienvenue mes amis. Welcome to another adventure in French. And today's adventure, well, it's how do you ask a question in French? And actually, you have three different choices. That's right, you can form a question in three different ways in the French language. So let's take a look at those right now. You'll be glad to know that all three of them start with the letter I, so hopefully that will make it a little easier for you to remember. And for this exercise, I'm going to use the one statement, tu écoutes la radio. You are listening to the radio. And we're going to form a question with that statement in three different ways. All right? The first way is through intonation. And we do this in English also. And simply it means you're going to raise the tone of your voice toward the end of a statement to indicate you are asking a question. All right? So if we're using intonation, tu écoutes la radio. Again, I'm just going to repeat the statement. Tu écoutes la radio. Put a question mark at the end. And you can hear it in my voice. Tu écoutes la radio. Tu écoutes la radio. Notice my voice goes up toward the end, indicating a question. All right, so this is the easiest way to form a question in French. It's also the least formal way, very informal, although it's used all the time, and you can see why, because it's so simple. All right, and to make this, all you simply do is change the period at the end of the statement into a question mark, and you're all set. All right, let's move on to the second way you can form a question, and it's called insertion, because you are about to insert a phrase at the beginning of the statement. And this phrase in French changes any statement into a question. What is that phrase? It's the phrase est-ce que. Est-ce que. When you put est-ce que in front of any statement, it automatically turns that statement into a question. So in this case, it would be est-ce que tu écoutes la radio? Est-ce que tu écoutes la radio? Are you listening to the radio? Notice I didn't have to rearrange anything. I didn't have to change anything in the statement. All I had to do was insert the phrase est-ce que in front of it, and I changed it into a question. All right? The only thing you have to worry about here is when that est-ce que comes up against a vowel, because you're going to have the e in que come up against a vowel in your statement, and you know how the French feel about those two vowels coming together. You're going to have to form an elision, which means you will drop the e in que and add an apostrophe. I've made a little note, and I've put an example sentence down here. I used the sentence Il nage à la piscine de temps en temps. All right? He swims at the pool from time to time. I want to change that into a question, saying, does he swim at the pool from time to time? If I do that with est-ce que, that e in the que is going to come up against the I in il. Can't have those two vowels coming together, so we're going to form the elision, drop the e in que, and as you can see, we add the apostrophe, and it becomes est-ce qu'il nage à la piscine de temps en temps? All right, and there's your question. All right, and est-ce que it's used formally, it's used informally, it's both. So a very easy way to ask a question. All right, now let's go on to the third one. And the third one is called inversion. And that's because you're going to invert, or you're going to swap places between the verb and the subject. So they're going to swap places. Instead of the subject coming first, the verb is going to come first, and then you're going to place your subject or your subject pronoun. This is what we do in English. You have the sentence, you are listening to the radio. When we change that into a question, we say, are you listening to the radio? And all we've done there is take the are and put it in front of the you. They've swapped places. Are you listening to the radio? So we have inversion in English too, and you wouldn't be surprised to find it in the French language. So let's use inversion. All right. And then we're going to say, all right, écoute, and then we're going to put our subject to écoutes-tu la radio? Écoutes-tu la radio? Are you listening to the radio? All right? Except in French, whenever you do an inversion, you have to put a hyphen between the verb and the subject pronoun. All right? Now, I said this one's a little bit more complicated because there are quite a few rules you have to remember when using inversion. First of all, in French, inversion requires a subject pronoun. I don't know if you remember what the subject pronouns are, but I'll go over them with you. The subject pronouns in French are je, tu, il, and elle, singular, nous, vous, il, and elle, plural. All right? You have to have one of those in order to do inversion. You cannot do inversion without a subject pronoun. All right? That's not true of English, but it is in French. If the subject pronoun is missing, then you have to add it. And I'm giving you an example down here under Note 2, where I've got two people's names instead of a subject pronoun. All right, we actually have the actual names. Marc et Jean, okay, that's Mark and Joan. Marc et Jean, all right. Danse-t-il? All right, notice. I couldn't just say danse, Marc et Jean, which is true inversion. I just would swap the verb and the noun. But I can't do that in French. I can in English, but not in French. In French, I have to have the subject pronoun, which, as you notice, is not in the sentence. So what do? I have to add it. So I'm going to put my noun first, which in this case is Marc et Jean, and then I'm going to say danse-t-il. And there you see the subject pronoun il, which is the correct subject pronoun to use for Marc et Jean, and I've got to add it. Notice it's connected with a hyphen. Marc et Jean dansent-ils? Are Mark and Joan dancing? All right? A little different from English in that the subject pronoun has to be present, even if it's not translated. Okay. The other thing, or the other note, that you need to be aware of when using inversion is that in the third person singular, and this is only the third person singular form, doesn't happen in any other form except the third person singular, which would be il and elle. When you do an inversion with il or elle singular, there has to be a T sound between the verb and the subject pronoun. If there's not a T sound, it has to be added manually with literally the letter T. And I've given you an example down here in note number 3. We have the statement, il aime la voiture. He loves the car. All right? Or he likes the car. All right? Now, I want to turn that into a question and say, does he like the car? If I'm using inversion, well, naturally, I would think, okay, I'm going to switch the verb and the subject, so I think it's going to be aime-il la voiture? And normally that would be correct, except this is the third person singular, and I have to have a T sound between the verb and the subject pronoun. And if it's not there, which it isn't when you say aime-il, I have to add it. And as you can see, what they do is they put a hyphen, a T, and another hyphen. And we have aime-t-il la voiture? Does he like the car? All right. So another difference in the way that French and English handle inversion. The other thing you need to be aware of is that with inversion, the French rarely use it with the je form. There are certain expressions and certain verbs that they will use je with in inversion, but normally they will stay away from using inversion with the je form. Okay? Well, there you have it. 3 different ways to form a question in French. Intonation, insertion, inversion. All right? So I'll let you decide how you want to form your question, and until we meet again, let me just say, à bientôt.